Today's episode of the Gap Year podcast has Krista and Eve from an organization called Gapforce. They're here to share so many insights on their incredible organization and some of the amazing trips that they run. It really is worth a listen to figure out if this organization might be the right fit for you. Welcome to the Gap Year podcast, where we explore the who, what, where, when, and why of gap years. It's real people sharing their stories, ideas, and experts diving deep into how you can make the right decisions in order to have a meaningful gap year. This is the place to be no matter where you are on your gap year journey. I'm Michelle Dittmer, your resident gap year expert. Let's jump right in. Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the Gap Year podcast. My name is Michelle Dittmer, and I am your host and Gap Year expert. Today on the podcast, we have two incredible human beings. We've got the lovely Krista and the wonderful Eve joining me today, and we're going to be talking about so many different topics, from sustainability and conservation to gap year experiences. It's going to be a really good one. So, Krista and Eve, thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad that you're joining me.
Thank you,
Great, thank you
Michelle.
for having us.
We're
Awesome.
really excited.
Well, why don't we start with a little bit of an introduction? We'll start with Krista, then we'll go to Eve. Who are you? Why are you on the podcast today? And that will give our listeners a little bit of grounding for where this conversation might go.
Nice. Well, thank you, Michelle. We are both so excited to have this conversation. If there's anything even I love talking about, it's definitely gap years, and it's not just because it's our job. We work for Gapforce, which is a UK tour provider based in London, that's been operating since 1989 in the gap year space. I am based in New York, though, so I'm a little bit more accessible. If anyone in Canada is interested in our programs, I'm the person you'll be talking to because I'm a program advisor for Gapforce. So I know our programs in and out, and my job is to help you make sure that you're making the best decision for you and that you are finding the program that's best for you on your gap year.
Awesome. And
Wow.
Eve, who are you?
I took my gap year post university. I ended up taking kind of two gap years off the back of a trip that I booked through Gapforce, which is our game ranger course that's based in South Africa. And since I've got back, I now work with Gapforce in their operations department. So I help kind of the participants that have just booked on. I sort them all out, kind of give them some support and prepare them for their gap years.
That's so important because it can be very nerve-wracking to be jumping into a new adventure. And so we're so glad that there are folks like both of you to help through that process from making decisions and getting booked in all the way through to the support that they receive on the ground, because doing it on your own can be very, very overwhelming. So thank you for being professionals in this space that can support people on gap year. So kudos and thank you to both of you. So, one of the things that we wanted to really talk about and highlight in this conversation, this episode of the podcast, was this idea of sustainability and conservation. It's really a topic that I hear a lot when I'm talking to young people and they're imagining what their gap year could be like. And we talk about, well, what's important to you? What are the things that you're interested in discovering and learning about? And often they have this idea of sustainability. Sometimes they can very easily define what that means to them, and sometimes it's this this kind of mystical thing called sustainability. But sometimes it's very, very concrete, and a lot of them are very aware of what's happening with the climate crisis, what's happening to habitats and extinction, and just so many things that are happening in our physical global environment. And so the idea of conservation and sustainability is a theme that keeps coming up. And luckily, the folks at Gapforce have some expertise in this area. So I'm wondering, Krista, if you could kind of give us your perspective on why sustainability and conservation is so important in today's day and age, and what would it mean for a young person to get some hands-on experience in the
Mhm.
field, working with Gapforce, doing some sort of conservation or sustainability project?
Mhm. Yeah, it's something, a trend we definitely see with folks who come to us and talk to us about our programs as well. I think the simplest answer is the folks who are interested in gap years now have been raised in an environment of seeing this ever-changing climate, and they're experiencing the effects firsthand, and they want to also be able to feel like they can be proactive or productive against that. And I think at the heart of it too, is a lot of people are driven by the feeling of wanting to have an impact, right? I think a lot of times in the gap year space, there's a lot of conversations around making a gap year worth it. And
Hmm.
I have some, I have some personal feelings about that messaging because I think, any experience on a gap year is worth it, right? It goes towards your growth and progress. But I think there's just this like feeling of I want to have an impact. I want to make a contribution with my time. And I think sustainability and conservation efforts are one of the ways that people really feel the most fulfilled. And we definitely see that with our marine conservation courses and our game ranger course. On our marine conservation courses in both Thailand and Costa Rica, folks who join the program are joining ongoing research projects. And so they're aiding and helping a long-term goal. And these dive schools need these volunteers to keep this going. And so it's a mutually beneficial relationship that creates, I think, lifelong memories, but also like lessons that you can't learn in a book, right? And that's where
Amen
the
to that.
hand, I mean, that's what a gap year gives you. It gives you tactile, tangible experiences that you can't have in a classroom, that you can't imagine, right? You have to get in the water, you have to examine the coral reefs, you have to meet people who are also passionate to really, learn more about yourself and the project at hand. Um, and I think, we even see folks who join who maybe they're taking a break from their studies because they want to make sure this is something they're interested in, right? Or maybe they they've always been interested in marine conservation and they want to see like what it's like to be there firsthand. And so there's lots of motivations for, I think, wanting to be up close to sustainability and conservation, but the general thread is just wanting to help make a difference. And I think that's something we all strive for, you know?
Yeah, and I love the way that Gapforce integrates that into larger projects.
Hmm.
I think often or sometimes when we see programs listed online, it's like, here, let's do a beach cleanup, or
Yeah.
like let's pretend in air quotes
Hmm.
to make a difference. And when you're working on those longer term projects that do require tasks that you are fully trained and capable of as a gap year student. We're not asking you to come in with your PhD and
Hmm.
identify different microbes under a microscope, or like
Yeah.
sequence the DNA for the different corals. Like that's not something that's within the scope of the abilities of somebody on a gap year. So the folks coming
Hmm.
into these programs are giving tasks that are very reasonable for them to complete, and they contribute to the betterment of a larger project that's going to
Hmm.
have a long-term impact. So not only do you get that personal fulfillment of the day-to-day of actually
Hmm.
doing the thing, but also the satisfaction that this is going to contribute to a longer, more sustainable change in the world around them.
Exactly.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. So you talked a little bit about the marine programs, but you did mention before that you also have another one. So why don't you jump in and share a little bit about that one?
I will have Eve take the reins because she has firsthand experience. But our other major, I guess, conservation focused course is our game ranger course in South Africa. And then we also offer for the folks who don't want to commit 8 weeks, there's a smaller volunteering option to be on the game reserve in South Africa as well. But Eve has plenty to say. She's experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, so our game ranger course is based in a place called Port Elizabeth, just an hour outside Port Elizabeth on the Eastern Cape of South Africa. There's a little bit of my heart. I spent a lot of time there. It's a course that is 8 weeks. You're living on the reserve for 8 weeks, and you come out at the end as a qualified game field guide. So that's what they call that. So the people that kind of drive around in the safaris and point out and go, "This is a giraffe. You never would have guessed," and I'll tell you all the beautiful things about giraffes. But a lot of the training that goes into it as well is the understanding of how reserves run, specifically in Southern Africa. So the conservation efforts that are going on with the reserves, how to look after them, how to make sure that not only the specific ecosystem of the reserve is running well, but how that reserve running well is going to impact all the other reserves in the area and then within the country and then within Southern Africa. But it's our 8 week course. It's two, uh, sorry. It's sorry, my mind's just gone completely blank. It is 4 past 4 in the afternoon, and I'm losing my mind a little bit. Where was I? Yeah, so it's an 8 week course, and you're living on a reserve. You do have a chance to go off the reserve as well, like during the weekends and when you're not studying. So you do get to experience a little bit more of South Africa as well with that. And you're living with other volunteers that are there for, as Chris said, like a bit of a shorter period of time who focus solely on kind of doing the conservation efforts. But kind of doing as a student on the course, you do the conservation with the volunteers, and then you also go back and understand why you're doing it and go into a bit more depth about it with that, as well as also learning about elephants and giraffes and rhinos and their gestation periods and all that kind of fun, exciting stuff. And for me, I've got a background in kind of environmental science and geography, so it was really up my street. It's always been something that's been on my radar of conservation, sustainability. It's always been one of those things that's been in the back of my head that's, something I'm interested in. But it was, yeah, fantastic that I found a course that was able to kind of love and ignite my love for travel, but also take in my kind of academic passions as well with that.
I love that. I love that it's synced up so well with the other things that you were interested in. And I'm curious that getting that hands-on experience, how did that shape you as a person? How, obviously it shaped your career a little bit because you're here today chatting with us, but how did what you saw on the ground, or what were some of the experiences on the ground that have turned you into the person you are today?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes it's really tricky with conservation efforts and these projects because you do join on to a longer term thing. And, I was there for 8 weeks, but it was so much more ongoing. People were coming and going 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. You'd go and you'd join and you don't really see a difference straight away because it's so much you're planning for the future, you're investing in the future of the reserve by doing the conservation efforts then. So I think being kind of on the ground, hands-on, working with the rangers on the reserve and understanding why it is important to be doing these things to, even though it's, kind of a small scale as a single reserve, but again, just why chopping down some trees which are alien vegetation, which shouldn't be there in the first place. You think it's kind of counterproductive. We shouldn't be chopping down trees, but actually it's taking away resources from the trees that should be there, and the trees that should be there are the ones that the giraffes eat. And if the giraffes don't have the trees they want to eat, they're not going to be able to survive. So I think that kind of hands-on work for me, again, it's something I've always been kind of aware of, but having that hands-on experience is, there's nothing like it. There's no way that a textbook or even just talking to someone can really relay. But it's that kind of doing the day-to-day activities and then, getting to know the other volunteers that you're with who are also coming from similar places with their passions, and the rangers and guides on the reserve that are, devoting years of their life to this. It really is really something special.
Yeah, and I love that there is like the micro impact and then this lot larger game that you're playing into, and that's daunting and empowering all at the same time. where you're like, okay, well, there's a lot of work to be done, and this is going to take generations to restore to its former glory.
Mhm.
But it also reinforces how important that work is. Like, if we're not starting it now, things are only going to get worse, and we're going to
Yeah,
have
exactly.
more work to do. So every little bit really contributes to it. And I think also you having that experience and taking that experience and that knowledge back to your home, talking about it with other people, like the ripple effect goes
Mhm.
beyond just what you did on the ground, and it shows up in how you live your life on a day-to-day
Mhm.
basis and the conversations that you have and the purchases that you make and the votes that you cast. And I think really that's part of this ripple effect of getting involved in seeing things on the ground, like you said, like even VR or YouTube videos, like none of
Mhm.
it does justice to being there and using all of your senses to take in the environment and really fully feel, not just see and hear and experience, but truly feel what it's like to participate in the larger scope of making this world a better place.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Krista, can you tell me a little bit about, Eve was mentioning that there are different volunteers that come for different lengths of
Mhm.
time. What does that look like? Because I know a lot of people are very nervous about being away for
Mhm.
a long period of time, but they still want to have an impact. So what does
Mhm.
that look like with Gapforce?
Yes, so for the Game Ranger course specifically in South Africa, we have a very flexible volunteer program. So you can choose between 2, 3, or 4 weeks, and you can choose when you go. It runs every Monday throughout the whole entire year, and it's this way so that folks can fit it into their gap years, into their schedule. Some people do it as a between a break in the summer or their winter break, but when you go, you're going to be living with volunteers who are there for very varying different lengths of time. And you're in a dorm style setting. So when you start, you are always with the same cohort. So it's not like, you're being, the first person to arrive and you're completely new. There's always like a fresh batch of volunteers, but you're at least entering an environment where people have been living there and can welcome you in. And we are always here as a resource. I like to say that Gapforce is, your guiding hand throughout. So if there's ever any issue or anything like that, we are in touch with you throughout the entire course, and we're sort of like that extra check for someone to go through. So I personally haven't had any complaints about folks being, lonely or isolated on this program. It's a really great environment to make friends in, and especially to make friends from around the world. It's a very global program. There's people from Germany, Switzerland, the US, Canada, the UK, other countries in Europe. Like it definitely attracts people from all over. And so I think that's an added benefit of getting like that cultural exchange while you're there. So. It's pretty great.
Yeah, and Eve, you were mentioning too that they're all values aligned potential friends because they clearly have passions and interests similar to yours. And sometimes when we're moving through high school or we're moving through our undergraduate, we don't necessarily find those people so easily because it's a whole mosaic of
Mhm.
different people. But when you are looking at a program that specializes in something like this, people that have that same thirst for adventure and hands-on experience, the folks that you're going to interact with are going to be very easily new friends of yours, and
Mhm.
like you said, Krista, from around the world.
Yeah.
So Eve, did you make any good friends on your experience, or what was that like?
Oh, I did. I made so many fantastic friends. I'm in the UK, and my friendship group has gone from, a very small place in North Yorkshire in the north of England to, across the world. I've got friends in Australia, in the States, lots of them dotted around Europe. Um, and it's just fantastic. It's a bit of a nightmare to meet up, and the schedules don't always match, and you're FaceTiming someone at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're, just happy to see you. But it's fantastic because you get that kind of effortless cultural exchange as well that is so big, and it's just as simple as someone sitting around the table and be like, oh, well, I call my evening meal tea, and that's because I'm from the north of England. And then
Mhm.
someone in Australia goes, that's so strange, we call it dinner. And it's that kind of effortless understanding of that you get not just of the country that you're visiting and you're in, but also of the people that you're meeting that have all come from around the world. And that was one of the, the things that I was telling myself kind of when I was on the way, like going to the airport, off to go to South Africa, first time I'd done any sort of big trip by myself. I thought, look, the people that are going are all going to be interested in this in the very least, or at least they're going to be someone that's fun and is going to do this. They might not have the biggest interest or experience with conservation, but at least they're fun because they're also getting on a plane and going to South Africa and doing this thing on their own. So it's just great, and you meet just different people with different experiences that kind of empower you to also think. Maybe if you've not met, maybe if you've got the bestest friends in the world from school or from university, but there are people that are doing this experience with you, and that's kind of bonding, and they can then say, well, I've actually just come from doing 6 weeks in Asia that I've done around on my own. And you kind of can talk to each other about your experiences in this part of your life, which is new and interesting, and that you might not have with friends that you've kind of grown up with in your city.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that that is so important. And one of the things that we do at CanGap is we actually have a free year-long accountability group for that reason, because other people don't necessarily understand what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So to when you get on the ground and there are other people that you can share that experience with, the nerves that you had or the excitement that you had, or even just figuring out your career afterwards and being nervous about that, like all of those conversations come so much easier with people who have a similar lived experience. And in Canada, for sure, it's not a standard practice to go on gap time. So
Mhm.
to find those people that you can have just that easy flowing relationship conversation and shared experience is such a beautiful thing that you may not find elsewhere.
Mhm.
So
Exactly.
I'm curious, Krista, maybe you could walk us through what does the support look like from the Gapforce perspective? So new person reaches out to you and says, I'm interested in a program. Can you walk us through what that process looks like, and what kind of support they can experience from pre-program, on program, and after they finish their experience?
Perfect. Yeah. So if you're from Canada or the US, the person that you'd be first in contact with is me. And the first thing I like to do is schedule an info call. I think they are the best part of my job, and they are the easiest way for me to sort of gather what someone's interested in, what are their goals, what are their expectations, because I think an informed decision is the best decision. We do not want anyone walking off the plane and being, completely surprised by what they're going to experience. So first thing is we'll do an info call. I'll kind of gather which programs you're interested in, answer your questions. You can have as many info calls as you want, right? There's no pressure to make a decision. And let's say we've done that, we've talked about it, I've answered all your questions, you've read the brochure 100 times, and you're feeling confident and you decide to book on. That's when you get put into sort of our pre-departure portal, and you're passed on to our operations team, which includes Eve. And then from that moment, we are in constant contact leading up to the trip. We're getting, necessary documents from you. You're getting documents from us. We're giving you packing lists. We're answering any questions about currency. We're usually putting you in a WhatsApp group right before your departure, a couple weeks, so that if there's anyone else going on your program, you get to meet them ahead of time. You get to introduce yourself. So you're, heading into this experience as prepared as you can be. And then once you're there with these specific programs, you will then be in the care with the reserve or the dive schools. And then we are in constant contact with the dive school and then sending check-ins while you're on your program. And then when the program's over, we are also checking in and making sure you had a fulfilling and satisfying time and getting all of the info we need from you as well. So we are just on we are just constant communication, but we want to make sure that we're as accessible as possible. So, Eve, did I miss anything?
No, I think you got
Yeah.
it all.
Oh, and we will maybe sometimes follow you on Instagram, or, if you want to follow us or share anything on social media, that's also something we do too.
Amazing. That's so wonderful.
So.
Come on. All right. So they've gone through this whole experience and they've had this wonderful time, and it's kind of like intangible. I've been changed as a person, all of these things. And a lot of people are looking for something concrete, something that they can use in their career, use in their future. And I know you mentioned that there's some coursework and some things that happen on the ground. Can you expand on that just a little bit as well?
Yes, definitely. So that's one of the things I love about these programs is that while you're also going and having these life-altering experiences, you're also working towards real life certifications. And so whether it's our marine scientist training program in Costa Rica, where you're doing your PADI scuba certifications, and you can also work towards your dive master, or our Thailand marine conservation, where you're getting your RAID scuba certifications and can work towards dive master, or our dive instructor course as well. You can become a dive instructor in Costa Rica as well as working on the conservation projects. You're walking away with hard-earned certifications that you can then add to your resume or just add to your life skills. And so a lot of folks really do feel fully fulfilled at the end of these programs because they're able to do the work, but also have something that concretely, like you said, concretely shows it. And I think one of the things that's kind of challenging when you're deciding what to do with your gap year is every decision sort of feels like the rest of your life, right? And I just want to say that, deciding to do a marine conservation program doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to become a marine biologist, right? It doesn't mean you have to. The skills that you learn there and the certifications you earn can be applied to so many different courses and paths and career options that I think is just a great way to grow and learn in an environment that not many people get to experience. So I'll have Eve talk a little bit more about our game ranger certifications as well.
Yeah, so the Game Ranger certification is a level one field guide. It's from it's for GASA, but it's the Field Guide Association of Southern Africa. So it is specific to Southern Africa, but it is yeah a qualification that is kind of known globally. And if it was something you wanted to get into, I know one of the girls that was on the course with me, she had just done a zoology degree and then was going to work. She was from Ireland. She wanted to go work in a zoo there doing a bit more of the kind of management stuff behind the scenes. So she did that to kind of get her into it and kind of understand a bit more like that. I did it just because I love the environment and the animals. And when I was there, I struck up a relationship with the reserve. So I went back after I did my 2 months. And then a year later, I went back and worked there for 8 months as a guide, which was great. And that was, fantastic being able to kind of put my qualifications, even though it's not something I'm looking to do long term or make a full career out of it, I was able to put the qualifications that I'd worked for into practice and had guest interactions and took charge on safaris and was able to kind of show myself and people what I'd learned.
Yeah, I love that. So it can be a very strategic tool, but it can also just make you the most interesting person in the room,
Yeah,
which is so valuable. Like,
exactly.
I love to
and
be.
yeah, and as somebody like I've looked at a lot of resumes, and I've done a lot of kind of hiring type roles, and looking at those resumes, like so many of them are like graduated high school, graduated uni, worked at Sephora, like
Yeah.
very, very basic stuff. And the ones that stand out are people with like, I have my like I don't know, my scuba certification. You're like, ooh, that
Hmm.
person's interesting. They've done something different, and it makes you stand out, which I think can be helpful, even if you're applying for a job as an accountant. The fact that you also have other interests, you've done interesting things,
Hmm.
will set you apart regardless. So whether you're going to use them for a career kind of stepping stone or just a piece of excitement that can jazz up your resume, it just adds to the fact that it's an outward representation of all the transformation and experience you had that only you truly 100% know, but it's a currency that you can use outside of that to start conversations and to get your foot in the door in various areas. So it's wonderful to know that that exists out there for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. All right. So, as we wrap up this conversation, I love to find out what your pieces of advice would be. So, somebody just kind of starting their gap time, trying to figure out what's before them. If you, with all of your wisdom that you have through your gap time and through working with lots of gappers, we'll start with Eve. What is your tip or best advice for somebody in that position?
Um, I would probably say like don't panic because I know like as I booked on pretty last minute to go on the game eng course because it was post uni and it was a great idea. It was a great idea until it was an awful idea when I was heading to the airport and I thought what on earth am I doing? This is mad. I shouldn't be doing this. And my mum was driving the car and she said, well, just go to the airport and see how you feel. Got to the airport and she was like, no, this is still crazy. Like, this is mad. I'm not doing this. We'll just check your bag in and and then, you start to go, well, it's fine. It's only 8 weeks and blah, blah, blah. But don't panic would be what I say. It's going to be great. It's going to be fine. The worst thing that happens is you book a flight home. It's,
Mhm.
but everything in between is going to be great and fantastic. And you're going to learn so much. Don't panic.
I love that. I love that. And nothing is final and nothing is a life sentence.
Yes.
Exactly.
But taking those risks. And the fact that at one point you were confident in it means you
Yeah.
probably can
Yeah.
follow through with
Yeah.
it. And it's just those
It's
jitters
a
and
good
those
idea at
nerves.
some
And
point.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful advice. So don't panic from Eve. Krista, what is your advice for folks?
I think my number one tip, and I feel like maybe easier said than done, but definitely just a perspective to hold on to as you start your program is to be adaptable. I think, there's so much planning that goes into picking a program and, planning to travel and a lot of anticipation that you sort of, will go into it with expectations that I think you need to just let yourself have the experience and move with it as it happens. I think, being adaptable is also a skill you'll learn by the end of most gap year programs, but like going into it with an open mind and sort of taking the program as it comes and, having confidence in yourself is the best thing you can do. I think a lot of times people, especially if you're doing a gap year after high school and pre-uni, you're coming from a super structured environment, right? And you're entering a completely new routine, country, cuisine, right? There's so many different things that are going to be different and new. And so, like, letting yourself be open to those experiences, I think is the best thing you can do for yourself.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
There's only so much we can curate our lives.
exactly.
And it's not a curated Instagram feed. Like this is real life.
Exactly.
There
Yeah.
are things that are going to come at you. And when you're coming from a space where you get like a notification if your bus is going to be 1 minute late,
Yeah.
the uncertainty that comes with real life outside of that needs to be embraced. And like you said, sometimes easier said than done.
Hmm.
It's a process to
Yes.
be uncomfortable and be okay with being uncomfortable
Yeah.
and adapting to things that are thrown your way. So,
Hmm.
but 100% I agree. A life skill that will serve
Hmm.
you well no matter where you go in life. 100%.
100%.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Krista, Eve, thank you so much for joining me on our episode today. It was great to hear your stories, learn a little bit more about your programs, and I'm excited for our listeners to check out all of your resources. We will link to you in the show notes. So if folks want to check out those programs, we will have all of that information in the show notes for them. So again, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Michelle. This was awesome. I
Thank
had such a good
you.
time.
Awesome. And to our listeners, my friends, keep on adventuring, and we will chat next time.
Bye.